Welcome to Locked On Heat. On today's show, we dig into some theories behind Duncan Robinson's shooting slump and how the Heat can help him snap out of it. This episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, it's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you may be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. David, we're recording this a day after Duncan Robinson went 1 for 9 on threes against the Nuggets. And while he's not the sole reason the Heat lost that game, he certainly was not helping them keep pace with a Nuggets team that was shooting better than 50% from beyond the arc. And the shooting slump for Duncan Robinson continues. There was a moment there where it looked like he might have been snapping out of it a couple weeks ago in wins against Utah and Oklahoma City, but he's been right back to those sub 40% shooting ways. And it kind of, again, crested last night with that 1 for 9 performance and just a dreadful offensive performance by the team in general on a night without Jimmy Butler, without Tyler Herro. So we're back now to the questions of what's going on with Duncan Robinson. We've got some questions that we can ask of all of this. We got some theories that we'll get to here in a minute. But first, I figured we could hear from Kyle Lowry. This is Lowry after the game when asked about Duncan Robinson's shooting slump.
Duncan's a heck of a shooter, right? And we all understood that what he is and what he was doing and how he could get the ball off and how many shots he can make. But I think just right now, just got to keep, not necessarily say feeding him and keep pushing him to keep going, but we got to find more opportunities for him to get more standstill threes and threes where he hasn't. Defenders are not as close, to him. Maybe we kind of just let him play decoy for a little bit and get him some shots to the easier ones. A lot of our offense is him moving and getting open and getting handoffs from Bam and getting the shots off. And, who knows, we may need to just, single side tag. If someone helps you, knock it down, who knows? I mean, that's not my decision. That's just thoughts.
So Kyle Lowry's got some thoughts, David. Do you think it's as simple as, hey, Miami, just stop with all the Duncan Robinson stuff. Just try to get him easier looks from a standstill position from the corners, things like that?
It could be. I mean, I think Lowry would certainly be one to know exactly what he's talking about. I'm like, maybe I don't want to read too much into it, but also kind of seemed like Lowry was maybe questioning Eric Spoelstra a little bit and the way he runs the offense. Like, I don't want to say that there's any kind of necessary dissension there, but it didn't seem like he was in total agreement with the way Duncan's being utilized, and that he's voicing it publicly through a media post-game presser. It seems a little bit like an odd choice, considering he's a new player, and Eric Spoelstra has worked with Duncan as closely and for as long as he has. So I don't know.
I mean, a couple of things there I agree with you. That struck me as really interesting. Kyle Lowry just basically saying, "Hey, maybe we should do all of this stuff."
Not
instead
my decision.
of any of the other stuff that we were doing. But
it's a bit from like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where you can say whatever you want to. You can insult the hell out of a person who says, but at the end of the day or something, I forget exactly what the quote was, but a different line he can throw in there. It's like, oh, but having said all that, it's like, that's what like it is. Having said,
that's like my grandma. She'll say, bless his heart. And then just after that can say anything, but bless his heart. Listen, I do think I'm okay with Lowry doing that. That's a veteran point guard playing the point guard role. The point guard should have thoughts, right? And I'm glad he talked about it. And it did kind of feel like to me that it was something he'd been thinking about. Like, I don't think he just came up with that.
No, absolutely.
But that's exactly why you signed Kyle Lowry, so that he does have thoughts. And Eric Spoelstra has been known to just go into the huddle and be like, "What do you think we should do?" Right? Since the Big 3 days to now. I mean, that's something he does. It's not dissension. I agree with you. I just think they got to try to do something to help Duncan Robinson snap out of it. And we've got some other theories that we'll get to later in the show, but that to me is the number one thing I'm looking at. The thing about that specific, I guess, theory from Lowry is that it's not as if Duncan Robinson has been crushing it on those easy looks. I mean, he's shooting 37%
Right.
from the corners, which is about the same as what he's been doing for most of his career. Actually, it's been a bit of a higher volume this season from the corners. So the corner is the easiest 3-point shot in the game. They actually have been getting him more of those easier looks. And then just those raw catch and shoot attempts. He's shooting 31% on 7.2 catch and shoot attempts per game. Again, that's a career high for him. But the percentage has just been awful. I mean, you go back to last year, 6.4 3-point attempts on catch and shoot attempts per game. He was shooting nearly 42% on those looks. The year before that, 46% on those looks. Again, this year, 31% on those looks.
Right.
I mean, even when he is getting the easier shots, he's not making them.
So something that Lowry mentioned too is that he kind of hedged himself a little bit after he said it. He didn't like the way that Duncan was being force fed the ball. Is there something to that, you think? Like maybe they're trying too hard to get him those kind of looks and kind of changing their offense around as opposed to maybe getting those open looks organically and having others create pressure. I think it kind of it's like this not necessarily symbiotic relationship, but it kind of plays off one another. If you get Duncan wide open looks, it makes everybody else's job easier. But if you get everybody else going earlier, then it makes open looks for Duncan that much more easily. And I think that's kind of what Kyle was hinting at. Maybe stop trying to get Duncan going early on and try to get other people involved in their offense. And then maybe you can kind of, again, like he said, use Duncan as sort of a decoy. Do you think there might be something to that?
I guess. I mean, only because flow is a real thing and bad shooting is contagious, as we saw last night in that Nuggets game. And maybe if you're not forcing Duncan into stuff, like the game could come to him a little bit easier.
Yeah.
He is averaging a career high in 3-point attempts, over 9 a game right now. So
Third highest in the league, right? Yeah.
third highest. You could afford to bring that down 1 or 2 attempts per game, and maybe that's it. But I think maybe Kyle Lowry and maybe other players on that team, just speculating here, might be frustrated with, why do we keep trying to get this guy going when he's obviously not going? Let's just try to do something else and win some games. Not that the Heat aren't winning games, and they have a perfectly good excuse to lose last night without Jimmy Butler and Tyler Herro.
Right.
And again, Duncan Robinson is not the reason they lost that game. But the big story to the beginning of the Heat season is that Duncan Robinson is in the shooting slump, and you could just feel this team. I'm telling you, I said it yesterday. I'm going to say it again, David. This team is going to go on a run here as soon as Duncan Robinson breaks out of the shooting slump, because you could just see it. Everything is going to click into place. That's something I want to talk about. We got some more questions about what could help Duncan Robinson coming up next. But first, David, tell them about Indeed.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be a debate between LeBron and Michael Jordan, but when it comes to helping you hire all-star talent faster, the GOAT is Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want: a short list of quality candidates as fast as possible, because you can do it all: attract, interview, and hire, all at Indeed. Don't struggle on your own to find quality candidates. Indeed can help you hire the right people right now. I've used it. It's been so successful, so much easier to try and find the right people to work with. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process, so you can find talent with the skills that you need through tools like instant match assessments and virtual interviews. Pick what skills are important to you from over 135 assessments and get a clear view of your top talent's abilities faster. With Indeed assessments, you can reduce hiring time by 12%, according to Indeed data worldwide. Get started right now with a $75 credit, a sponsored job credit, to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/locked. Indeed.com/locked. Offer is valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. And you know what else you could use? Probably a good treat over the holidays, because it's just, everybody loves the holidays. They love the good food, the treats, plenty of them. But maybe you want a yummy dessert, but maybe you want something that isn't so full of calories and sugar. It's the perfect time for Built Bars, because Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. No guilt. There's so much stress already over the holiday for a lot of people. You don't need to stress about Built Bars. You just grab one on the way to work or at the gym or anywhere that you're headed to, shopping perhaps, and you get the kind of treat that you need. Indulge in something delicious. Replace the coconut cream pie with a new coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar. So many different options, delicious flavors, and new ones coming out just for the holiday. They're all soft, 100% covered in chocolate, easy to chew, It's such a great treat. So don't worry about grabbing anything for Built Bar Black Friday. Mark your calendar. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off, but only if you go to built.com.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to check out that YouTube channel and subscribe. We are available on all podcast platforms. Let's get into some more of this Duncan Robinson stuff, David.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna ask a quick question, because you know how, like, for years Doc Rivers made sure that DeAndre Jordan was getting that early look, the first touch, and regardless of the way it played out, had to get Jordan going as a confidence booster. And we've heard so much about Duncan Robinson and the imposter syndrome, and then we've seen the offense play out so often over the last couple of years of making sure Duncan gets that first look, make sure he knocks it down, sees it going through the hoop so he can start to build confidence. Well, guess what? He got paid $90 million. The confidence should be there at this point. He has to know that he's an NBA level player, that there's no more, you don't have time or the luxury of having an imposter syndrome at this point. So maybe it kind of plays into a little bit of what Lowry was talking about. Like, quit trying to get Duncan going early on. Quit trying to feed him the ball in the first few possessions to see it go through. And maybe that kind of alleviates some of the pressure. I've seen some shots from Duncan, and maybe you can chime in on this too. But when he doesn't have time to think about it, even if it's an incredible degree of difficulty, we've known for the past couple seasons, those are the type of shots that Robinson excels at. He knocks him down. Like, when he has too much time on his hands, that's when he starts to, like, question his rhythm, whether he throws his shooting motion off a little bit. He doesn't want to have time to think about it. Just get into it, do it when, you know, the shot clock is expiring. Those are the shots that look easiest for him. Am I crazy here? Maybe they just need to, you know, like Kyle said, kind of just quit trying to go to Duncan early on and let him kind of ease his way into it.
I don't disagree with that. I would say, but, you know, they got him a shot early in last night's game. He made it, and then he missed the next 8, you know? Yeah. And I don't, so maybe it's not, it does, I don't know if it matters when you get him. If it's early, maybe it doesn't matter if it's late. The only problem with it is that he's the only 3-point shooter in that starting lineup outside of PJ Tucker, I suppose, who really only does it from the corners. Right. And so I don't know that they can afford to just, you know, like, is anybody going to respect the decoy if the decoy hasn't been used early in the game? It's not just getting Duncan Robinson early for the sake of Duncan Robinson. It's getting Duncan Robinson getting going early for the sake of the entire offense, so they can have spacing, so that Jimmy and Bam can get to the basket, so that Kyle can get to the basket, just loosens things up. They need Duncan Robinson. I've said this before, and I wrote about this on the West Side today. He is the closest thing that the Heat have to Steph Curry. And that means from a guy who could shoot on the move, contested shots at a high volume. And those kind of players are so valuable in today's game, and the Heat just have one of them in that starting lineup, and it's him. If you don't get him going early, I don't know. I think there's something of a balance there. There's probably something to what Kyle is saying, not forcing the ball to him early, but I think it should just be a matter of establishing flow, and I think that the Heat could afford to do a few more of the Bam, Duncan Robinson handoff stuff, even though he hasn't been awesome on that. I got that stat too. I mean, Duncan Robinson this year on handoffs is shooting 29.8%, whereas last year 38.5%. So, you know, basically 10% worse than he was last year. Granted, it's a really small sample size, 2.4 handoffs a game, shots off of handoffs a game. So it's not like, you know, that variance, he can make, you know, 4 of them in a row. All of a sudden he's just as good as last year, right? Like that percentage can increase and decrease pretty easily. But all of that said, the other option would be, you know, do you just bench Duncan Robinson, right? Because then you don't have to get him started early because he's not in the game. And maybe, you know, this is something that's been floated out there. It's something that you and I have talked about and just sort of smacked right out of the air every single time. But I thought, you know what? Let's consider it one more time. Do you think that there's anything to benching Duncan Robinson? Because then you're really not forcing him early on the way that Kyle Lowry was talking about.
Now, do you keep things consistent then? Do you keep Tyler, assuming he's healthy again, consistently coming off the bench again? Or is he the one that's inserted into the starting lineup, which is the move that a lot of people want to make? I've seen also
have to do that.
I'd seen also, and I don't know how much you could count on this, the trade-off of kind of replacing Duncan with Max Strus, who brings you more or less the same skill set as Robinson. I don't know. I don't think if you're looking at a player who's going through quite possibly some psychological issue in terms of whether or not he feels confident about his shot falling, the right move is to say, you know what, we're going to bench you. Like, I know that you're trying to preserve wins, that you're trying to capitalize on a season, that you can't placate one player and sacrifice the rest of the team as a result. At the same time, that could be disastrous. You need Duncan Robinson at his best. And that's why we've heard so much positivity from Eric Spoelstra and the rest of that roster. Everybody's been so supportive of Duncan. Oh, he'll work his way through it. Even Strus said, in last night's presser, he said, he just got paid $90 million. He's going to figure it out. He knows what to do. And I think that's what everybody believes. And at the same time, they have to say that publicly and support Duncan because they need him. And so they can't afford to just say, you know what, you're not contributing. You're not helping out this roster. You're not helping out the starting lineup. And that's why we're going to relegate you to the bench, which is a demotion because his skill set fits the starting lineup so much. It's not like Tyler who can just come in and get his buckets whenever. He's closing games. Duncan's accepted that role. As far as we know publicly, we have not heard any kind of grumbling from Duncan in regards to having more of a closer's role. That's something that Tyler Herro seems best suited for. Duncan needs to be starting in order to be effective, and I think that's why you have to keep him in that starting lineup.
Duncan Robinson, the Heat with Duncan Robinson have been a plus 3.1 points per game, so that's good. In that when Duncan Robinson is on the floor, they're shooting 34.3% from 3-point range. You replace Duncan Robinson with Max Strus. The Heat with Max Strus on the floor without Duncan Robinson, the Heat are actually plus 4.6 in Strus's minutes. They're shooting 37.7% from 3-point range. So the plus minus has been better with Strus. 3-point percentage as a team has been better with Strus. But that said, it's only about 5 minutes a game with Bam and Lowry, Strus is, and it's like less than 2 minutes a game with Jimmy Butler. So it's not, you could pull out these stats and it still doesn't say much to me.
It's cherry picking. Yeah.
It's cherry picking. I don't think that's the way to go. I think if you bench Duncan Robinson, you have to start Tyler Herro because if you start Strus, then you've got Tyler Herro looking around like, really? And then it's too much. And I agree with you. That's shaking now Duncan Robinson's confidence in a way that I don't think you can afford to do or want to do. And like I said, like the Heat have been fine as when you go net rating, point differential, plus minus with Duncan Robinson. As a unit, they've been good with him. The spacing still works. You look at the way that teams react. Eric Spoelstra talked about this after the Nuggets game. Like they're still reacting to Duncan Robinson. NBA players, they're not dumb. They don't like, oh, he was 2 for 11 the other night, so he's no longer a good 3-point shooter. Like they know that Duncan Robinson is due to break out of this slump. They just don't want it to happen against them. So they're still going to react. I don't think they're going to react as hard, but they're still going to react, and the numbers bear that out. So I don't think that the answer, David, is to bench Duncan Robinson. I think you agree with me on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask a quick question because it seems like a lot of the frustration comes with this perception, and I think it is mostly a perception that Duncan is only able to do the one thing, right? And it's not that he can only do the one thing. It's that that's all they need him to do is the one thing. That's what they're asking him to do. They're not asking him to create shot opportunities. I think Duncan can be a playmaker if asked to. We've seen him make some nifty passes on occasion over the past 3 seasons of his career. He's not as bad a defender as a lot of people think he is. He is not as problematic or as one-dimensional as a lot of people perceive him to be. And I think that's part of the issue is that you're looking at when Kyle Lowry struggles. Well, at least he takes charges. It's like, well, so does Duncan. Yeah. I mean, is that why Lowry gets a pass? I mean, I know Lowry has a much more accomplished career, but I think that Duncan is still a good enough player where you can put him into any lineup and he's still going to find a way to contribute. And it's not just if his shot is falling. So I think that's kind of the problem is that everybody's kind of bagging on Duncan right now, but there's other roles and other players that are should deserve some of this blame too. I don't think it just falls squarely on Robinson's shoulders here.
You hit on something very important. That's kind of the next question that I want to bring up. Does Duncan Robinson need to add more stuff to his game? We'll get to that next. But first, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march into the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the sports action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use that promo code Locked On. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all these amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, back here with Locked On Heat as we continue to grow the show into new exciting spaces online and in person, doing watch parties and things like that. David and I want to hear from you, the listeners, about what you like and how we can make the show better. So if you could just take a minute, fill out our listener survey. The link is in the show notes. All you got to do is click it right now while you're listening to us. We really do appreciate all the feedback. Every survey counts and can help shape the future of the show. David, you mentioned something before we went to break there about, does Duncan Robinson need to do more stuff? You mentioned the playmaking, but one thing I keep seeing is online, I guess, is should Duncan Robinson does Duncan Robinson need to add a mid-range game? Because if the three-point shot's not falling, you've heard this before. Like, if that three isn't falling, get to the basket, get to that mid-range, just get closer to the basket, I suppose, and make those shots that are tend to be easier than the shots that are further away. Do you think Duncan Robinson needs to add a mid-range game?
Not when you've got Kyle taking shots from the mid-range, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo all limited basically to the mid-range. I mean, Kyle, in theory, a three-point shooter, but he's only at 31% this year. So he's shooting significantly worse than Duncan Robinson. Nobody seems to question that. But at least Kyle is getting to the rim, or at least he's attempting to get to the rim. So that's a big part of his offense. But you don't want to clutter up that floor any more than you have to. You don't want to revert Duncan to a mid-range shooter. To me, I think if his shot's not falling, and we've seen that on occasion, dives to the hoop, creating the offense that way, taking guys off the dribble when they're kind of expecting, they were closing out on him on the perimeter, that's the next level of his offense, not 15-footers. That's not what he's on the floor for. So I've seen the perspective. I get it. I just don't agree with it at all. I think he's going to be a three-point shooter, and when he can get to the hoop, that's fine. I don't, like, you don't want that kind of clunky offense. This isn't the 1980s. You don't want guys shooting 15 to 18 footers. It's just not going to work.
Well, and to your point, they already got guys that do that at a really high level. Tyler Herro is making 50% plus in that mid-range. Jimmy Butler is an awesome mid-range player. When Bam Adebayo's got it going offensively like he did in the second half last night to Denver, he's doing it from the mid-range. A big part of that is because Duncan Robinson is out there spacing the floor, right? I know we could talk about the three-point shot, the percentage all along, but it helps that when he's out on the floor, maybe sometimes it's Max Strus, whichever three-point specialist is out there for a reason, and it's not just to make threes. That's the number one thing that they're out there to do, but it's in order to space the floor because of the reputation that they have for being good at making threes throughout their career. And then you look at Duncan Robinson, and to your point, you like that Duncan Robinson keeper coming off the handoff with Bam. You like to see that every once in a while, him attack closeouts, and he does a good job of it. And you look at his shot plot this year versus last year, and it's basically the same as far as shots at the rim and shots at three-point range. Duncan Robinson is an efficiency guy. You don't want everybody out here adding mid-range stuff and doing all that nonsense, and you got to be really good at that to do that. That is a star. That is a star spot on the floor, is that mid-range. Herro is a star. Jimmy Butler is a star. Bam Adebayo is their star. Those are their stars. They get to fool around in the mid-range. Duncan Robinson is a role player. He's a well-paid role player, but that's not a reason why he should all of a sudden be throwing up mid-range shots that are not as efficient as the ones he ought to be making from three-point range or at the basket. So, no, I don't think that's Duncan Robinson's game. His role is to be efficient and to help everything else balance the floor, for everybody else. Our next question that I want to get to is, should Miami send Duncan Robinson to the G League? I've seen this out there. You throw him in the G League, coverages, defenses aren't as good, notoriously in the G League. You could put up points. I mean, who was it? Justin Jackson went out a month ago and made like 2 billion threes in a game or something. And all of a sudden he's like, this is the work I put in on Instagram and stuff like that. No, Justin, I'm sure you're putting in good work, Justin Jackson, but that's also because you're playing you're playing for the Texas Legends, you're playing the Grand Rapids Killer Bees or whatever they're called. No,
the Grand Vipers, I think, or something.
I think you're right. That's a good call by you. Do you think that's the answer? Do you think just send him to the G League for a week?
Absolutely not. Like, that's not going to do anything. If he can't knock down 3-pointers against NBA level defenses, shooting them against the equivalent of a guy who just was looking to get an opportunity, a call up, and a contract isn't going to help either. Like, that's I mean, he could go play his buddies from high school if that's the case. Like, I mean, I'm sure he's lighting them up. I mean, he can go get some run in at your local playground or something like that. I'm sure those threes will start to fall at some point. That's not what it is. It's going to take him feeling good about himself at the NBA level, not a demotion. That if we're talking about a demotion to the bench being a possible confidence crusher, hey, go to Sioux Falls where you started off. Wear those nice corn jerseys that they have somewhere in storage and see if maybe you can get it going. That's not going to help at all. What's the point of that? I understand some frustration. This isn't KZ Okpala, who's never been able to prove it at the NBA level, who needs some actual game reps. Duncan's been playing. In fact, if anything, he might be playing too much, something that I've talked about before. I think that maybe he is fatigued. I think he might be tired of trying to, work his way past minor nagging injuries. And that's the issue. He might need a rest, not a demotion where he has to, go through 130 possessions per game in order to score 30, 35 points. I'm sure his offense will be just fine in Sioux Falls. I'm sure it also doesn't matter one bit. And I'd like to see him scoring at his regular rate at the NBA level, not in Sioux Falls.
The G League is not used for people to build confidence in their skill level
Right.
or something. It's build confidence in that knee that you just had restructured, build confidence coming back from an injury or something like that. But the G League is to develop skills, not just sort of refine your confidence in
We know what he can do, right?
We know exactly what Duncan Robinson can do. This is new territory for Duncan Robinson, this being in a shooting slump. This is not something he's ever dealt with. And that's what kind of strikes me as interesting, David, is that this is not a guy who's been in a slump before and has figured out a way to come out of it. I mean, he has never shot worse than 36.7% in any given month since he became a real NBA player in 2019. In October, he shot 32.1% from three-point range. In November, just 33.1% from distance. So this is new territory for Duncan. And I think everybody is sort of responding it to that way with sort of a shrug and just saying, just keep shooting, I guess. Right. And honestly, we've just spent almost half an hour talking about it. We've spent multiple episodes in the past talking about it. I've written about it, wesgoldberg.substack.com. And it just sort of comes back down to like what baseball players do when they're in a hitting slump. Just keep swinging, right? And that's all there is to it for Duncan Robinson. I think there are ways that that he'll feel more offense, create more flow for him. Lowry, I think, does have something there with maybe not forcing him, just letting it come more in the flow of the offense. But this is just going to come down to one day. I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe tonight against the Cavaliers. I don't know. But Duncan Robinson going out there and going 8 for 15 from 3-point range, and just the slump is over. That we've seen it not with Duncan, but time and time again with Klay Thompson, Danny Green. Name your 3-point shooter. These things happen.
And look, I also have to point out, and again, I know we've said it, we've talked about it before. The weight of the contract is such a burden, not just for Duncan, which we assume like it's probably played some factors like, oh, I've got to live up to that value, et cetera. But how fans and media people want to kind of put that target on his back. It's like, now you're a $90 million man. Now you've got to live up to the expectations with that contract. That's unfair. I think he has a role player, and as the role that he provides, he's being paid a fair value. Is that, kind of exceedingly?
Absolutely. I hate that take. He's getting paid $15 million. He needs to add to his game. He should be better than. Look at role players across the league. Look at Joe Harris. This is what these guys get paid now. He's not. Max money is twice what Duncan Robinson is making now. Okay. I know it sounds like a lot of money to normal people, but for athletes, for guys like Duncan Robinson who are starting on an NBA team with championship aspirations, that's about market price for a 3-point shooter, for a rebounder, whatever your role is.
Right. Yeah, you pay exactly. There are other specialists, defenders, 3-and-D guys, etc. I think that get paid a lot of money for those specific roles. And considering what Duncan provides to this offense, even when that shot isn't falling, and it's just something we have to continue to reiterate, he is getting the kind of pay that he deserves or the value of what he provides there. So I think we need to kind of lay off that contract talk, and hopefully he's not feeling that kind of burden at all. But as far as the perception is concerned, he's a good role player. He's got the value of that role. I think he's being paid commensurately for what he provides for this team.
All right, that'll do it for today's Locked On Heat. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Comment and leave a 5-star rating. Reach us on Twitter at Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets. your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. It's free and it's available on all platforms.